The screech of tires. The blaring horn. The sickening crunch of metal on metal. Then silence. When I woke, everything was white. The sterile walls of the hospital room, the stiff sheets tucked around me, and the blinding overhead lights. My body felt broken, every limb heavy and bruised. Pain shot through my chest with every breath, but I was alive. "You're lucky," a smooth, steady voice said. "Most people wouldn't have survived that crash." I turned my head, the motion slow and painful, and saw a man standing at the foot of my bed. His white coat and professional demeanor gave me a small measure of comfort, though I was too groggy to take in much else. "Dr. Brandon Cole," he introduced himself, his voice calm but firm. "You've been unconscious for 3 days. You need to rest." I wanted to ask more, but exhaustion pulled me back under before I could respond. The next time I woke, the room was brighter and a nurse was bustling around. My head throbbed, but the fog in my mind had started to clear. That's when it happened for the first time, clear as if someone had whispered in my ear. "Poor girl. Wonder if she even knows how bad her injuries are." I blinked, startled, and looked around. The nurse hadn't said anything, yet I'd heard her voice. "Did you say something?" I croaked, my throat dry and scratchy. She smiled. "Just checking your vitals." I stared at her, my heart pounding. Maybe it was the medication. But it felt so real, her thought as clear as spoken words. A shadow of unease crept over me, but I pushed it aside when Jeremy, my fiancé, arrived later that afternoon. His familiar features, a strong jawline, dark brown eyes, and his ever-confident smile, were comforting at first. He rushed to my bedside, taking my hand in his. "I was so worried about you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. But beneath his soft words I heard another voice. "How did she survive? This wasn't supposed to happen." The blood drained from my face. I stared at him, unable to hide my shock. His lips moved, but the thoughts behind them drowned out his words. "Stay calm. She doesn't know anything." "What?" My voice was sharp and Jeremy flinched. "What's wrong?" he asked, his concern suddenly feeling like a mask. Nothing," I murmured, unable to process what I'd just heard. Later that day, Vanessa came to visit. She strode into the room with her usual flair, her designer handbag swinging from her arm. Her sharp features and platinum blonde hair were perfectly styled as always. She sat by my bed, crossing her legs elegantly. "You look terrible," she said bluntly, though there was a flicker of something darker in her eyes. But her thoughts betrayed her. We were so close. If only Jeremy hadn't hesitated. My heart shattered. Vanessa, my stepsister, the girl I'd grown up with, who I'd trusted as family, and Jeremy, the man I loved and was planning to marry, had been involved in my accident. I could feel the devastation rising, but I had to mask it. I smiled weakly, pretending I didn't hear the dark undercurrent of their thoughts, but inside I was breaking. That night, alone in the sterile silence of my hospital room, I let it all come crashing down. Tears streamed down my face as my body ached from the injuries that refused to let me forget the horror of the accident. The betrayal was a physical weight on my chest, compounding the pain I already felt. My ribs throbbed with each sob, and every movement was a reminder of how close I'd come to dying. Jeremy and Vanessa weren't just careless, they wanted me gone. The betrayal struck deeper than I thought possible. I'd loved Jeremy. I'd trusted him with my heart, and he had held my hand as we planned our future together. And Vanessa. She was family, the sister I'd chosen to keep close even when my father's marriage to her mother dissolved. Now I knew the truth. Their love, their loyalty had all been a lie. I spent the next few days trapped in a storm of pain, heartbreak, and confusion. The voices in their heads were loud and clear whenever they visited, revealing the truth they hid behind their carefully crafted masks. Jeremy's thoughts were panicked, full of guilt and fear. She doesn't remember. Does she? Vanessa's, by contrast, were cold and calculating. If Dad gives her everything, I'll have nothing. We need to finish what we started. Piece by piece I gathered the story. Vanessa had pushed Jeremy into tampering with my car's brakes. He'd hesitated, at least his guilt was real. But her manipulation, along with the promise of inheriting my father's wealth, had convinced him to act. They hadn't just wanted my father's money, they'd cheated on me too. Vanessa's taunting thoughts made that painfully clear. He never really loved her. If he did, he wouldn't have ended up in my bed. I thought I couldn't feel worse, but hearing that truth nearly undid me. Dr. Brandon Cole became my anchor during this storm. At first he was just my doctor, a quiet presence who checked in on me daily. But as the days turned into weeks, I began to notice the little things. One evening, I overheard his thoughts without meaning to. She's been through so much. I hope she knows how strong she is. Took me by surprise. Brandon rarely let his emotions show, yet his thoughts revealed a depth of care I hadn't expected. "You're a hard man to read," I said one night as he adjusted my fore. He glanced at me, his gray eyes piercing. "Is that so?" I hesitated, then smiled. "But I think you care more than you let on." For a moment his cold exterior cracked. "You've been through hell," he said quietly. "I just want to see you heal." But it wasn't just his care for me that stood out. Sometimes, when the room was quiet and he lingered after a long shift, I caught fleeting thoughts of his past. Regret swirled in his mind, sharp and heavy. I couldn't save her. If only I'd acted faster. It was a memory that haunted him. A patient, a decision, a loss. The details were hazy, but the pain was raw and real. I didn't pry, but I wanted to help. "You're not as alone as you think," I told him softly one day after sensing his thoughts linger on that regret. His eyes met mine, startled. "What makes you say that?" I smiled knowingly. "Call it intuition." The confrontation with Jeremy and Vanessa was inevitable. I invited them to the hospital, pretending to be none the wiser. "I need to know," I said, my voice trembling. "Why did you do it?" Jeremy's face went pale. "Do what?" Vanessa laughed bitterly. "She's lost it." But as I began to reveal the evidence I'd carefully gathered, their masks crumbled. Jeremy fell to his knees, his face pale and streaked with tears. "Please," he begged, gripping my hand. "I wasn't thinking straight. It was Vanessa's idea. I didn't want to hurt you." His thoughts betrayed him. "He can't forgive me. But maybe she'll believe I was forced into it." Vanessa, on the other hand, clung to her pride even as fear flickered in her eyes. "You don't have any proof," she snapped, her voice shaking. I leaned in close, my voice low but firm. "You're wrong. The police are on their way. It's over." Her confidence shattered. "Wait. We can work something out," she pleaded, her composure slipping. "We can fix this." I watched them fall apart. Jeremy sobbing, Vanessa desperate and panicked. Their fear was a bitter reminder of how deeply they had betrayed me, but it was also satisfying to see justice catching up to them. When the police arrived, they clung to me, begging and shouting, but I stayed silent. As they were led away, I felt a strange sense of relief. Justice at least was served. In the months that followed, Brandon became more than just my doctor. He was a steady presence, helping me through grueling therapy sessions, celebrating my small victories, and reminding me to be patient with myself. One evening, as we sat in the hospital garden, I turned to him. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to," he said, his voice soft. "But I do," I insisted. "You've done so much more than anyone else." His gray eyes met mine, and for a moment I thought I saw something deeper there. "You've done the hard part. Don't sell yourself short." As the sun set, I realized that while betrayal had broken me, it had also led me to someone who could help me rebuild. Perhaps, in time, there could be love again.